of the Viper as well, because that's something we've seen how good Rod is in Warlock, and no one's really running weapon removal anymore. So I do like that inclusion. We'll see if it comes into play, but so far already subtle. As we get into game number 1, Frenetic has the weapon available in his opening hand.
Yes, indeed. And it's interesting to see this matchup coming up first, because this is, or variations of this matchup, is something that we actually put a lot of testing into on Thursday with the other casters. And very fitting that we are referring to the more fatiguey version of Warlock as Delete Warlock, because me playing that deck, honestly, I just deleted Daruk over and over again on the other side. It felt like you just had the removal to get there, and then because of the extra fatigue tools that you have in the deck and the extra focus on quest completion and that strategy, you just got there as the more control-y, more delete-y version of the deck. And I think that's an interesting dynamic that goes back to the Daruk dynamic that we were talking about last week, right? Where in the pure handlock mirror, it was difficult to know when and where to play for tempo or play for fatigue. Well, now we're seeing two decks very deliberately split on each side of that divide, right? One that wants to play for threats all the time, and one that wants to play for removal and fatigue for all the time. And that shifts the Daruk dynamic even further.
Yeah, and I do think as time, maybe even years, maybe even generations go on, they will still talk about the Daruk dynamic. It's something that isn't going away anymore.
I will, at least. I don't think I've really got it over with anyone else, but I'm still talking about it.
Yeah, I just mentioned it because I just think it's funny more than anything else.
Yeah, okay.
Here, though, the benefit of Casie having those extra threats in the deck means he can make plays like this, get the null down early, and at least put some level of pressure on Frenetic. But I do agree, I think it is quite surprising a lot of the time how a deck without any threats could still just be absolutely fine versus a handlock with those giants, and while still progressing their own game plan.
Big deal. Gets the first proc on the Rod. Does hit a couple of 0-mana cards, but that is not necessarily wasted, because Cult Neophyte is a card featured in Casey's list, 2 of them, in fact. And that means that those 0-mana spells, the Raised Eds and the Coin, currently cost -1. So they will continue to cost 0 even through a Cult Neophyte now, which is actually quite a big deal.
This is just one of those slightly awkward turns that this deck can have, at least in my experience with. Yeah, tapping's always fantastic, of course, don't get me wrong, but sometimes the follow-up feels a little bit weird, especially if your opponent hasn't played minions. I guess it's a good problem to have, of course, but the follow-up just seems a little bit weaker. Like, did Frenetic really want to have to spend or choose to spend a touch on a 1-1 at that point, maybe?
Here for the tour?
Yeah, it's just about hand space as well for Frenetic,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Because his version is so draw heavy with backfires and the matron combo that he's found room for in the deck as well, that he needs to make sure he's down to 9 cards really on any individual turn. Because you don't need that much hand space to play matron hand, because obviously you're used to calculating like backfire, for example, as spend 1, draw 3. So the mental trap is to look at matron as the same thing, but it's spend 2, draw 3, because you also discard the Hand of Gul'dan at the same time. So you don't need that much hand space, but you do need a little bit of hand space. And of course, you want to keep on life tapping every single turn where available.
Most importantly here for Frenetic, the thing I found in this matchup you have to really do as the fatigue version of the deck is every single turn you need to think, can I beat a giant board? Like, can I kill the giants? And with the Soul Rend, with a Drained Soul, he can do that very easily, still life tap, still feel comfortable. But yeah, that's the most important thing, because for example now, on the next turn, if giants come down again or if more threats come down again, he might be looking a little bit more dicey to deal with them, although he is only 1 additional draw away from getting those Bristlebacks active. And I think I heard Daruk early when he was casting just almost exclaim the fact that it was turn 6 and Bristlebacks were being played for their effect.
Well, here we are. It's kind of interesting, that turn, actually. There's a lot of ways to go about it, and again, we are playing a breakneck pace here, so apologies, it's very difficult to cover everything that I want to, but there was the tug of war there between quest efficiency and card draw efficiency. Even mana efficiency, because in the end Frenetic chose to go Raised Dead first, which was slightly inefficient for quest completion, because he wanted to get both minions in hand before he then tapped, which drew a card and discounted his whole hand, right? So he got two mana Pantheras in his hand to then discount to 1, as opposed to doing it the quest efficient way, which would have been to have tapped first and then put 3 damage from the raised dead onto the next proc of the quest, but wouldn't have been as high tempo as what he was able to do instead.
And this is the weird thing. It's about to happen. When you look at the deck list, you think, well, they just play Giants and punch them and win, right? They're not playing any threats of their own. But now Frenetic's down to what, like 4 cards now with that backfire. He can double Bristleback this turn to just swipe away the Baron Scavengers without really any effort whatsoever, and he's just progressively edging closer to that final quest to get Tamsin online. And he's comfortable, right? 27 health, winning on board, 4 cards left in the deck, still got options with Soul Rend, removal, extra card draw for following turns, and one extra bonus with that Hand of Gul'dan is that it's often used in a post Tamsin play to just increase that card draw, in the same sense that you want a backfire available a lot of the times once you've played Tamsin to really ramp up that fatigue count.
How deliberately did you stop yourself from saying, in a post-Tamsin world?
A lot every time. It's just something I say, but now you complained about it a little bit. I'm like, now I need to decide, do I say more because you've mentioned it, or do I say less because you've mentioned it?
Yeah, the eternal line. All right, so kicking off 9 cards in hand for Frenetic. Just tap does complete the quest, but obviously we want to avoid disasters with completing quest with a 10-card hand, which means something does have to get played first. Again, I wanted to talk about this last turn, but again, not wanting to rudely interrupt the important things my co-caster was talking about. These players play so fast that sometimes it whizzes by. He did have the option to just drop out a Drain Soul, for example, on one of his own minions, like on his own 1/1, for example, just to preemptively clear out this hand space this turn, which, as you can see, might have actually ended up being a pretty big deal. Allowing him to just do more aggressive things. But the fact there was a very threat-dense turn from Casie probably meant that Frenetic was always going to have to spend this turn doing a little more removal-based things, and that Drain Soul that he's held on to is actually going to help him out in pushing through this. He did also have the Tamsin Neophyte interaction that we love talking about available to him, but in the end does choose to go, I think, just straight up for Tammy 2 this turn. Is going to leave a little bit of damage up in play.
And I also think this life tap, in case he had to Soul Rend, this life tap was perfect, right? Because the one card he wanted out of the 3 that were left, I think, was Hand of Gul'dan. Like I said, to just go absolute maximum fatigue damage and pretty much OTK at a lot of instances, right? Like once that Tamsin is down, if you have that much card draw, you're dealing upwards of 20 damage a lot of the time if you have multiple ways to draw more than one card. So that pull was really strong. Didn't end up going for that Soul Rend, but still leaves him options to clear stuff up this turn. I'm just trying to work out what Casey's going to actually do about this, because even clearing this board and pushing a bit of damage, he must feel like he's very much on the back foot now. Oh.
Hey. Wait, what? Hello? Casie, are you okay? I think he just mentally, like, you know, when he's going through his check marks for the turn, he like shot the Tamsin for 6 damage and went, yep, okay, that's dead.
That's
Don't have to worry
dead.
about that anymore. Yeah, I just forgot to do the 1 to it.
Is it never lethal?
With Neophyte, I don't think so, right? Because he can't cast all the hands that...
You can cast Hand and Backfire, though. And push 7.
So how much did he do here? So 24, and he would have done 4, 5, 6.
And he would have done 7 from the Tamsin, right?
4, 5, 6 would have been 15, plus 7 is 22, so no, that still wouldn't have gone.
Okay, yeah, and he wouldn't have been able to tap, right? Regardless, Frenetic takes game number 1, and again, for those of you who may not be too experienced in the way that matchup works, it is deceiving, because I'll be honest, when I first looked at it, I didn't think the Fatigue version would stand up against Giants. But it just does a lot of the time. We found that out when we were testing it a lot. We were like, wait a minute, why can you keep killing all my threats and then just Tamsin me to end the game? It's so strong.
It really is, yeah, and I've even been jamming it a little bit on ladder just because I actually had quite a good time testing it. But there are a lot of matchups available where you don't quite get there to the same level when you're not playing the threats in there yourself. You do get to torture other aggro decks, which is a lot of fun as well when you come up against a Face Hunter or a Shadow Priest. Just the insane amount of healing that you have, and if you're playing the Altar of Fire version, just how fast you get 3 mana, 3/3 lifesteal, shoot for 6, which just ends the game, is potentially very devastating. But I do think the deck has a lot of room for growth, a lot of room in the metagame as well. And as you said, that was very much our experience, because we decided to test the matchup because we were like, this version with no threats, this just gets murdered by Flesh Giants, right? Let's test it out. And then the exact opposite happened, just time after time after time, as the removal just lines up. You saw there, Tamsin didn't even get used from Frenetic, which I was finding a really useful piece of removal, just to be able to go Tamsin Soul Rend at any point in the game and just clear a board of any size, just using one natural Soul Rend from my deck, and Frenetic didn't even need to approach that point. He just got there.
Yes, this is one of the drawbacks of the deck, though I've found, at least when I've been playing the Fatigue version, is any sort of high damage combo deck, or just high damage deck in general, or burst damage, should I say. This deck can be tough because it's very fast as well. And then also I found Quest Mage to be difficult, because by the time they get to that fatiguing point, you probably just kill them as Quest Mage because you don't have to mess around with giants. So I found those decks kind of difficult. So this at least is going to be feeling a little bit more comfortable for Casie going into game number 2.
See, I actually played against Quest Mage once on ladder and absolutely smashed them. And what I will say is that one of my Altar of Fires burned a ice barrier, which slowed down their quest enormously, because obviously I wasn't playing any minions, right? Anytime I played a minion, I just shot it myself. So they really weren't. By the time I was fatiguing them, they still hadn't completed quest because they just didn't have the tools in their deck to be able to do it. So I do think that's an interesting one. But yes, certainly I did play this matchup several times as well. And the only times I won it were the classic Garrote Rogue, my opponent through the game situations. Really, I had very little agency in what was going on, and my opponent just messed up. So yeah, I do think this is a pretty miserable matchup for the threat light version of the deck.
Frenetic is getting about the biggest threat he has really in the deck down nice and early, though. It's got the Matron, gets to cycle through the deck even further with that Hand of Gul'dan proc, of course. But Casie has plenty of ways to deal with it. He's already had tons of card draw, has an Octo. He's just missing that one card Subtle at this point.
Yes, indeed. The one card known as Field Contact. Casie picks up a counter spell here. The other options were Devolving Missiles and Deck of Lunacy, I believe. You always want to at least have the meme discussion about picking Deck of Lunacy and then putting a bunch of bleeds into your deck, but obviously that's stupid. And since this isn't the threat-heavy version of the deck, I think that's what takes you away from Devolving Missiles, because that card is premium against Flesh Giants, right? Even though the minion that you leave after a Flesh Giant is still quite difficult to remove after you devolve it, it's still fantastic just so Flesh Giants don't go in the Raise Dead pool and come back for 0 mana later on. But against this version of the deck, what are you going to devolve? The threats just aren't really there to justify that card.
Yeah, and although you mentioned the counterspell, super important, he picked up the Arcane Intellect, because it is honestly the only time in most matchups I've seen this deck struggle is when they just don't gather the combo pieces, right? They don't get the card draw, they can't get the field contact, so they can't combo them. And that Arcane Intellect, although still didn't get Casie a field contact, is helping just get through the deck quicker. And how much... As the Warlock here, Sol, do you think Frenetic can just not care about most board states and just hyper-focus on card draw here? Because I feel like if he's going to die to combo, he's going to die to combo no matter what health is at.
Completely agree. Yeah, I think the matchup is fairly linear. I think the handlock, classic handlock matchup is different.
Yeah.
Because you can pressure them in that matchup, and what pressure does is sometimes force your opponent to use Plunderer, Shadow Step, Plunderer, for example, and then they're down a Shadow Step, right? And that Shadow Step can't be used for a field contact, it can't be used for spell damage later in the game. So suddenly, you're cutting into the number that they have available. This deck has no way to force the opponent to cut into the number that they can do. So if they get to combo, you will die. It's not even like you're playing armor vendors in this version of the list, which some people are, right? Where you can get above the one of the breakpoints, make them actually do one of the max combos that they have in the deck. Like, you are just going to die if you get comboed. So I think wasting time, wasting mana, killing minions is just going to slow down what your actual win condition is, which is drawing cards and completing your quest as quickly as possible.
Yeah, just like the Rogue. The cram session pickup there from Casie, again, important because he's still not at the point where he feels comfortable being able to draw through the deck due to that lack of field contact. Now Frenetic is active in terms of that 10 cards or less, so he can snipe these if he really wants to, but again, it isn't progressing his game plan. He doesn't need to be overly defensive. I think the Bristlebacks would only come down if he had spare mana on any given turn to play them, right? And you just think, why not at this point?
Oh, slightly unfortunate. I think that the tour guide did not get hit with the weapon buff. Obviously, the discounts only land up until the 4th card is drawn, and then the weapon procs and breaks, which means he doesn't really have good ways to dump cards this turn, while also life tapping, which he would have loved to have done. But instead, he just drops the 2nd rod out of his hand instead. And you always have high hopes for the 2nd rod, and it's never quite as good as you expect. There are exactly 7 cards left in the deck, which means that it's only going to proc once at best here. But yeah, I've been in these late game situations where you're like, well, even if I just discount this hand, I'm still worth playing this rod, right? And then it dawns on you that you just literally don't have enough cards left in your deck to do that.
Right. Casie did get hold of the field contact though, hence the Octobot coming down, the reductions coming down, counterspell kicking in now, and Casie can't quite go off yet, can he? Or do you think the fact he has 2nd field contact in the deck means he's probably just going to have one of those half pop-off turns, just to cycle through and then go, so it's like 2 turns away?
Yes, I think that's what he will be wanting to... Hang on. I'm
hanging on.
Lost track of the quest. No, okay, we're good. I wasn't sure if that backfire was completing quest or not, which I just wanted to keep a quick eye on. But yeah, because Frenetic is going so quick with his own quest completion, Casie might not even have 2 turns from this point, because I'll tell you what is relevant. We've been talking about how damage for Casie to Frenetic is not particularly relevant. Damage from Frenetic to Casie, putting Casie down to 16 here, is super relevant, because that now just makes the fatigue win condition all that much easier.
It's just through the deck. Double Neophyte. Casey's hands go up in the air because with double Neophyte, it's a little bit more difficult to get away with anything big here.
Yikes. Even the double field contact out has probably been carved away by the double Neophyte, because sometimes in situations like this, you can just slam both Neophytes on the board and just go absolutely turbo through your entire deck. Oh, the other Octobot. I mean, there's a bigger, more glaring problem right in front of Casie, which is the freaking board he's facing
19.
down right now.
As of now, 19 damage, so he has to do something to kill at least a few of these minions to even feel like he has a chance. We can see, and Casie knows there's Tammy 2 in hand, and quite well, he'll know there'll be a backfire available as well, because Frenetic's drawn his deck.
He's just trying his level best to make something happen here, but he just can't do it.
Wow.
Being forced to Octobot to save enough mana to even try and pop off there meant that the Garots were going to come out at full cost, and full cost under double Neophyte is 4. He was forced to prep to then throw away. Like, I think his only option was to go that turn, right? And, you know, maybe he found Prize Plunderers and Shadow Steps to stay alive even, but then A, he probably would have been within range of a fatigue kill the next turn from Frenetic on the other side. B, he'd carve away so much of his own spell damage at that point by using Shadow Steps and having already committed 1 to the board that turn, that he probably just wouldn't have a win condition left in his deck at that point. That is not my experience with the matchup, where the Warlock actually manages to go faster, but lo and behold, there it is. It turns out, still, as much as we want to big up the player skill and agency of the player and how players can throw or they can pull miracle games out of nowhere by playing really, really well, there is still a degree to that deck that says you must draw field contact in a timely manner, or else your deck does very, very little.
It does mean now going into game 3, Casey's going to go back to the, or go to, should I say, the Shadow Priest for his last deck, and it's a weird one right now because when I was playing a ton of Shadow Priests like a week or so ago, I enjoyed the Warlock matchup because a lot of the time you just kill them way too fast. But with this fatigue version that Frenetic's running, we've seen the sheer speed in which health recovery is an option, even more so with those bristlebacks. But also, there's just the fear of Soul Rend. It can put you so far back that without a fantastic refill or just a strong setup with the Aug Merchants and health buffs and whatever, of course, you can just lose to just a timely Soul Rend without refill. So a little bit scary to go against this, especially knowing that there's less dead cards in the hand, right, for Warlock. The Antherion's normally a dead one because they can't afford to just sit and tap to 10 cards, sorry. Even the Nulls can be a little bit expensive sometimes, especially the Giants in the first 4 turns of the game. So this, even though on paper can be quite strong, it's not a given that Priest is going to take this.
That's 3 damage on turn 1. It's a very good start, and then the Raised Dead will be able to... Well, okay, both Raised Deads now will be able to keep this board as full as humanly possible at all times. But let's not forget, Frenetic also has that natural tempo swing ability in his deck because he plays that Matron combo, which I think is particularly destructive against Shadow Priest. I think Shadow Priest is very well known for making minions of about this size, right? 5 health minions, 6 health minions?
Yeah.
So if we're in that 5 health minion range, Nightshade Matron can create such a huge tempo swing.
Yeah, and in case you're wondering, it wouldn't be too much of a surprise to see it come out on curve in this matchup, right? We can see a Bristleback land means that Casie has to at least respect this with 1 trade, put Frenetic back up to 30, then continue. The cat doesn't really want to leave the 3 damage on board. But Frenetic will almost certainly be forced into playing this Nightshade with probably a coin into touch this turn, just to feel safe.
Yeah, and this is where this double Raised Dead is going to come in incredibly clutch because Frenetic does not have the ability to kill this long term. He does discard the Rod there. I mean, he would have been rewarded, right? I was going to ask the question, but again, kind of flew by. Do you just tank the damage? Do you just play the Rod on this turn and hope that your deck is kind to you in terms of card draw? He would have been rewarded with the backfire the next turn, but obviously with Void Touch Attendant then coming down, that would have been a pretty big disaster. And look at this turn now from Casie. Absolutely disgusting.
Soul Rend off the top!
Is he pinging?
Hey, Casie, what's wrong?
Did he ping?
I don't know.
Did ping.
Huh?
Why?
Yeah, when I screamed when I screamed perfect, it was because he finishes on reader on an empty hand. That's exactly what you want in these situations to keep the pressure high.
Please, slow down! The animations are legitimately 2 turns behind what our players are doing. This is nonsense. Chill. Everyone just chill, okay?
Oh, okay. Raised Dead here for Frenetic. If he gets that Bristleback, it's a huge deal. He is on the 10 cards or less right now.
Yeah, it's a really big deal. And it's why I think it is a smart decision. And it's a smart decision that I think a lot of people do miss. That you're very comfortable playing that out in the early game because it does then immediately go into your Raised Dead pool, which is such a big deal. And I think based on the way things have gone so far, guaranteed, because I think those are the only 2 minions that have died at this point. And
just
now
the Pantharas now,
has Nightshade Matron plus hand in hand and another fairly guaranteed Raised Dead for more healing available as well. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, important to note as well, the second Soul Rend was discarded from the first one, so he doesn't have a second Soul Rend left. This is very close. We can still Matron and then Raise Dead into a Bristleback.
Yeah, it still has the lifesteal available on board as well, which of course is a big deal. Oh, second natural Void Touch Attendant, though, might just be too much. I'm not sure if Frenetic can deal with enough of this, and he misses the Bristleback.
I've had questions before about how good is Voracious Reader in the deck, and sometimes it's bad, but sometimes it does this, which is horrendous. There's threats, but Frenetic also has to look at that Voracious Reader and try and kill it if he can, because every single time he's making trades elsewhere, Casie just gets to refill every single time.
Tamsin available. What are these 3 cards? Are any of these last 3 cards actually Tamsin value at this point?
Yes.
Ooh, yes, 1 touch.
Yeah.
Okay. That could be a huge deal here.
10 of Casie this turn.
Mm-hmm.
Can Divine Shield something as well, which is huge, of course.
Yep.
I imagine he's going to go for Divine Shield over the 1/4. Yeah, makes sense.
Yep, think so. Just protect the taunt from the 5/2 trade on the other side, I think does make the most sense here. There are 2 targets left on the board on the opposing side that would be able to be used for that touch of the Natazem draw if it does come here from Frenetic. And it does! Ooh. Now there's Tammy, Touch, Nightshade, Matron.
The problem is, though...
I think you weren't supposed to tap there, right? I think that's just a mistake from Frenetic because now he can't play the Nightshade Matron without discarding the Hand of Gauntlet.
Yeah.
He would have just discarded Backfire or Rune or the Rod, which would be fine in that situation, I think. But
And that's also the slight issue he has for the rest of the game, is it's going to be quite difficult for him to even carry on playing, right? Like, he'll keep taking damage because although he's only 3 out of 7 on his second tier of the quest, he's a long way off winning, and Casie still has some juice left.
to be fair to him, this is the play he was looking for, right? He wanted the other card, where he picks up the Bristleback instead. However, I still look at this hand and say, well, now you can't play Nightshade Mage.
5/5 rush.
Literally ever until you complete the quest, which you are still some way away from doing. So I think probably the priority of getting Matron on board was better there. If it even straight up kept him alive, which I think it probably still did, right? I think it'd be the same amount of damage left on board, but he would be 6 lower. So actually, no, because without the healing, he would have been from 5 plus 4 plus 2. I think he just would have been straight up dead to the board if he had gone with the Matron play. So perhaps I'm giving Frenetic a hard time here for no reason, and that was the play that he actually needed to make.
You were just a burden.
This work?
We'll gain the quest, right?
2, 3, heal for 3.
That's 4.
Goes up to 4, but there's just too much damage left on the other side, right?
Yeah.
No way he can get enough health to be able to withstand this and get the Tammy 2 backfire combo down to be able to end the game. So Casie does square it up in the end with an absolute nutso opening. He was freaking out and losing his mind quite rightly when the Soul Rend came up off the top to destroy that huge board that he made, even though we saw it after they'd played 2 more entire turns of Hearthstone. But I think the fact that it was so many cards milled, and among them the other Soul Rend, just gave Casie so much security to just spam minions for the rest of the game after that point, right?
And the fact he had the hand to spam minions, right? Double raised Eddie got very early on with those 0 costs, very huge. But also, that Voracious Reader drew 1 million cards, and normally in a matchup like this, the way you beat Priest is you force them off the board, make sure you're healthy, and then most of the time they're reduced to playing like 1, maybe 2 minions a turn, which is normally manageable. But as you quite rightly pointed out, the sheer volume of cards that Frenetic lost by Soul Rending, some of those were heal and removal cards, of course, but also the fact that Casie just had turns and turns and turns of more minions really put him in that corner. And even if he could have stabilized the board, I think he just died to fatigue anyway that game at that point, right? Yeah. So really tough one there for Frenetic. Casie fights back, but now we're going to get that Shadow Priest mirror, and just at a quick glance, I do believe these are almost certainly exactly mirrored decks.
Yeah, this seems to be the list that's being favoured more and more now, particularly in competitive play. You see some other builds hanging around on ladder, but even then, not that much and not at particularly higher ranks. So this version with the 4/0 mana cards does seem to be the way that people are going. And not only are they mirrored deck lists, but they're also fairly similar openings here with Void Touch Attendant in both. However, I think Tour Guide is a particularly big advantage to have in this particular mirror.
Yep, raw tempo option. You play it and you get to 0 mana, deal 2, and normally kill an enemy minion, or at least help kill, which is everything. You'll see both players scrap for board at the absolute maximum rate here, and Casie definitely has the stronger opening by far. Or not.
Well,
Closer.
I mean, Frenetic had a very high win rate opening with the Void Touched Attendant and the Desk Imp, but then his opening hand win rate went down significantly when he drew the Desk Imp, of course.
Too much power!
Quick, go face! Yeah, if you're really a silver lining kind of person, the benefit of him having Benedictus in hand is that he can freely hero power this turn, because not many draws would have helped him out too much there.
More like a wisp.
Looks like another hero power turn, I imagine here. Yep.
Finally now, Tour Guide can come down to deal with the Void Touch problem on the other side. Culturan Chaplain will come down, and I think Casie will be banking on one of these minions getting to attack on the following turn.
I will say, the Homunculus feels like the 30th kind of card in this list, honestly. But in this matchup, it's actually pretty clutch, because a Taunt and 5 health is very, very strong indeed.
It is, yeah, completely agree.
Even though it's delayed.
Frenetic very ahead on tempo here, but Casie significantly ahead on value, but the double Voracious Reader might just end up being too much here overall.
Yeah, the problem is, like, value's good, but not if you just can't stick a board, and this Benedictus potentially next turn. Again, along with the turn that the Homunculus pops out, that's just a lot of health to try and punch through.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty high tempo turn for Frenetic, all things considered. 2-5 essentially.
Oh, you trade.
0 mana 2-5 this turn, essentially, and then 5-6 coming down alongside it, even though the 5-6 isn't particularly high tempo in its own right. That is a big, big, scary board, and now Casey's in the unfortunate position of having revived a Void Touched Attendant while being behind on board, which is a pretty significant issue.
Yeah, I mean, he can barely even push through the Homunculus this turn, which also, if you're ever ahead on board in the Priest Mirror, it's way more okay to use hero powers to just kill minions and spend the 2 mana, right? Because you're just gaining so much advantage, and normally when you are ahead on board, you do have the luxury of having spare mana, I guess, because you've used it all to get ahead on board.
That was not the draw. Worst draw in the deck, you would imagine, outside of the one remaining Murloc, one remaining Desk Imp.
I think you play them both anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, one's certainly coming down this turn. Frenetic obviously right to hero power first, in case there's some weird and wacky world where he manages to spend all his mana off the top next turn. But still, I think just going max out for tempo here, because they individually challenge the 2 minions on the other side of the board, right, I think makes the most sense.
Traveling Merchant might be the saving grace here, though, for Casie. He needed something big to kind of act like the Benedictus is acting on Frenetic's side of the board.
Got exotic wares.
So I like this a lot.
And funnel
Yeah,
cakes.
true. Comes down as a 5-6 to contest, except Casie paid significantly less for it in this situation. Does now get to cash out a little bit of face damage with the Void Touched Attendant. See what Frenetic does here if he wants to go face. Obviously, he should do that before anything else. He doesn't actually have any other way of dealing with the Void Touched Attendant that isn't trading into it with the Benedictus anyway, though.
And I actually think it's fine on his side, on that side of the board now anyway. He gets to push 6 face, can hero power the 2-1. And it still means if then Casie wants to deal with the Benedictus, he either has to use his own Void Touched or ping as well. I actually really like the face plan here. Pile on more pressure.
Yeah, I think I like face as well.
Because there's... It's tough because Frenetic's playing off the top of the deck, of course, and he knows Casie has minions to follow up with. But the way I see it is just force Casie to do the trades for you, right? And just gain the damage because Frenetic's so far ahead in health.
Yeah, I think the big fear going through Frenetic's mind right now is Wriggling Horror, but I think at certain points you just have to say, I'm not going to play around that, right? And as it stands right now, that you have 2 targets on the board that need to be pinged, right? If your 5-6 wants to be traded into efficiently, then that needs to be pinged, like 5-6 and the ping to kill it, right? But then the 1-3 doesn't contest the 3-2,
right.
So Casie also wants to ping that. Whereas if you make the trade into the Void Touch, Casie just trades his 5-6 into your 5-5 and pings your 3-2. And then he has board, right? You're just giving him the board for no reason at that point. Essentially, we used to refer to it way back in the day as giving your opponent's minions Wind Fury by trading into them,
Right.
which is essentially what that would be doing.
And Casie, wait, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He can't play the Void Touch, so he's dead. Oh, I guess unless he double trades. He has to double trade then, right? Wait, am I being stupid here?
No. Dead on board.
Yeah, he's just dead, right? Because the double Void Touched.
Yeah, 7+4.
I had to check then, because I was like, I play Priest a lot. Like, I know the numbers. Wait, Frenetic. Yeah, you just... Yep. Yep. Yep, okay, good. Yeah, there you go. Casey's realised. I was so questioning myself then. I was like, surely not. But yeah, that's just like that. Casie. He was in a rough spot, but it was a blunder in the end. He could have just not played the Void Touch and just at least factually not been dead on board, right? You just have to say that's a big blunder from him, and that's going to lose him this series. Frenetic moves on and gets to add a few extra points on the stack he already has on the standings right now.
Yeah, and the series was a bit like that for Casie, honestly. A couple of uncharacteristic blunders for him. One of the weakest performances I'd say that we've really seen him have on stream and Grandmasters. And again, you know, the speed of play was ridiculous. I know I was talking at the beginning of the broadcast that we do seem to have some of the fastest players. That was extreme. Like, that was above and beyond that series. And again, I've made the point much before that you can't really be critical of someone's style of play, speed of play, whatever, if they're not making mistakes. If they are making mistakes, then you can start talking about it, right? But even then, that last turn for Casie, he thought about it extensively. He just then did the wrong thing, right? So sometimes you just don't have an explanation for that in a spot like that. You just have to say, yeah, brain just switched off, made a mistake.
Yeah, and he's paid for it, hasn't he? Like, Frenetic took the series. He's going to be moving on to the semi-finals, of course, to go up against the winner of Psycho, or between Psycho and Floki. Just a quick note you're saying about Priest builds. I believe Psycho is bringing the Mankrik Visions version of Priest there, so we can talk about that maybe a little bit later on.